It was 2 a.m. when the quiet calm of a suburban neighborhood shattered under the flash of red and blue lights. Sirens wailed down the narrow street, echoing off the houses where families slept peacefully, unaware that tragedy was about to unfold just a few doors away. In one of those homes, Dr. Alana Hale stirred awake to the sound of engines and shouting. She thought maybe someone had broken down, maybe there'd been an accident. What she didn't know was that her address had just become the center of a fatal mistake. Hey everyone, welcome back to Swift Tale, where real stories remind us that life can change in an instant. And if you're visiting for the first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is not just a story, it's a question for all of us. What happens when the people sworn to protect us pull the trigger too soon? Tonight's story isn't fiction. It's a tale of tragedy, identity, and truth about a woman who lost her life because of fear and a man who turned his grief into justice. Her name was Alana Hale, and she was the beloved wife of Commander Marcus Hale, a decorated Navy SEAL who had risked his life defending his country. But in the early hours of that cold night, while Marcus was away on duty, his wife became the victim of a police raid gone wrong, mistaken for an armed suspect when all she held was her cell phone. The police claimed they saw a threat, but the truth, as it always does, ran deeper and darker. What followed would shake not just a neighborhood, but the nation. Because this wasn't just about a shooting, it was about perception, fear, and the deadly consequences of assumptions. This story matters because it forces us to confront questions we often avoid. How does a trained officer see danger where there is none? How does a woman's skin color, her presence, or her home turn into justification for lethal force? And what happens when the victim's husband isn't just another name in the headlines, but a Navy SEAL commander, trained to fight for the very system that failed his family? Before we dive deeper, take a second to imagine this. You're half asleep, your child is in the next room, and flashing lights fill your windows. You step outside with your phone to call for help, and within seconds, you hear a command, a shout, and then a gunshot. No time to explain, no time to live. What unfolded that night would expose deep cracks in a system built on trust. It would spark outrage, inspire change, and lead one man to turn unimaginable pain into purpose. So stay with us, because by the end of this story, you'll see that sometimes justice isn't found in the courtroom, it's found in what we do after the silence. Before that horrific night, the Hale family was the very picture of quiet happiness. Commander Marcus Hale, a respected Navy SEAL veteran, had finally returned home after nearly a year overseas. His wife, Dr. Alana Hale, was a pediatrician known for her kindness and calm under pressure. Together, they were building a life that blended discipline, compassion, and love, a home where laughter replaced fear and duty was balanced with devotion. Every morning began the same way, sunlight spilling through the curtains as Alana prepared breakfast for their 7-year-old daughter, Maya, who loved leaving notes for her father in his uniform pocket before school. The kitchen walls were filled with hand-drawn pictures of her family, crayon-sketched hearts surrounding the words, "My hero, Daddy." Marcus, still adjusting to civilian rhythm, found peace in the small routines, folding laundry, fixing a squeaky door, or sitting on the porch with Alana, coffee cups in hand, sharing quiet smiles about how far they'd come. Neighbors admired them. Alana volunteered at the local clinic on weekends, often providing free checkups for underprivileged children. Marcus trained local teens at the gym, teaching them discipline and respect, never revealing too much about his SEAL past. It's not the medals that matter, he'd say, it's who you protect when no one's watching. They lived humbly, away from the spotlight, in a simple 2-story home on Maplewood Lane, where safety was never a question, or so they thought. On the evening before that fateful night, Alana tucked Maya into bed earlier than usual. Marcus had been called to a base meeting out of town, promising to be back the next morning. They spoke on the phone around midnight, just small talk, a soft, "I love you," and a reminder to lock the doors. Alana smiled as she looked around the quiet house, thinking how far they'd come from the chaos of deployment life. She didn't know that just hours later, flashing lights would blind those same windows, and silence would fill the rooms that once echoed with laughter. Their life, full of love and quiet purpose, would soon become a headline, a story retold by strangers who would never truly know them. But before that moment, before everything broke, they were just a family like any other, hopping for a better tomorrow, completely unaware that their peace was about to shatter. It all started with a single 911 call, one that changed everything. The dispatcher's voice was calm, steady, just like any other night, but the caller on the other end was trembling. A man whispered that he'd seen a suspicious figure near his neighbor's home, moving through the shadows, carrying what looked like a weapon. The address he gave was the Hale residence. At 1:47 a.m., squad cars were already rolling. Officers Ryan Carter and Elena Brooks, both with less than 3 years on the force, responded first. The neighborhood was quiet, dimly lit, the kind of place where nothing ever happens and where fear can twist reality in an instant. Inside the Hale home, Dr. Alana Hale had woken to the faint sound of knocking, or maybe it was shouting. She grabbed her phone, walking toward the window, confused but calm. She thought maybe it was Marcus calling. His base number sometimes appeared unknown. Her phone's flashlight flickered as she stepped toward the porch. Outside, the officers saw a light move across the window. The dispatcher's last words still echoed in their ears, possibly armed. Their adrenaline surged. "Hands up, step outside slowly," shouted Officer Carter, his weapon already drawn. Alana froze. Through the glare of the police lights, she couldn't even see their faces. She held up her phone to illuminate the scene, to show she wasn't a threat. But from the other side of that blinding beam, the silhouette looked different, distorted. "Drop the weapon," a voice shouted again. She tried to speak, "It's just my phone, please." But before her words could reach them, a sudden crack split the night, then another. Neighbors woke to screams. The lights from patrol cars reflected off the walls as one of America's safest suburbs became a scene of chaos. Alana collapsed near the porch steps, her phone still glowing faintly beside her. The silence that followed was unbearable, broken only by the frantic radio call of a young officer realizing the truth. Moments later, paramedics arrived, but it was too late. The woman they thought was a threat was gone, a mother, a doctor, a wife, taken by a decision made in fear and haste. At that same hour, miles away, Commander Marcus Hale's phone began to ring. His heart sank when he saw the missed calls from his neighbor. And then, the message, "Marcus, something happened. You need to come home." What began as a possible intruder alert had just become the worst night of his life, and the beginning of a storm that would test everything he believed about justice, loyalty, and truth. When Commander Marcus Hale reached Maplewood Lane just before dawn, the world felt unreal, like a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. The flashing lights painted his house in shades of blue and red, sirens fading into the morning wind. He could see the yellow police tape stretched across his front yard. Officers whispered as he stepped out of his truck, still wearing his uniform from the base, his name and medals gleaming faintly under the street lamp. "Sir, you can't go in there," one of them said, but Marcus didn't hear him. His boots hit the pavement, his chest tightening with every step toward the porch, the same porch where Alana used to wave goodbye. Now it was surrounded by evidence markers and silence. He froze when he saw it, her phone, lying on the ground, the screen cracked, still faintly glowing. He picked it up with trembling hands. That small, ordinary object suddenly felt heavier than any weapon he'd ever carried. His wife, the woman he'd fought to come home to, was gone. "Where's my wife?" he demanded, his voice breaking the air like a gunshot. An officer hesitated, then quietly said the words no soldier, no husband should ever have to hear. "Sir, she didn't make it." The world tilted. The man who had faced war zones, gunfire, and chaos dropped to his knees on his own lawn. He wasn't a SEAL commander at that moment. He was a husband whose entire world had been stolen in seconds. Reporters began to gather down the street. Someone whispered his name, "That's Commander Hale, Navy SEAL." The story was already spreading, but Marcus didn't care about the cameras. He stared at the house, at the shattered glass, the blood-stained steps, and the same question looped through his mind: how could this happen? Later at the station, the explanations came all cold and clinical. She matched the description. It was dark. She had something in her hand. Words meant to justify, not to heal. Marcus said nothing. He sat in silence, jaw tight, eyes hollow. Every instinct in him, the discipline, the training, the restraint, battled against a wave of rage he could barely contain. When the coroner handed him her wedding ring later that morning, something inside him broke. That was the moment he made a silent vow, not of revenge, but of truth. He would uncover everything, every body cam, every report, every lie hidden behind procedure. They thought they had made a mistake, but they didn't realize who they were dealing with. Marcus Hale wasn't just a grieving husband. He was a commander trained to see through chaos, to expose deception, and to fight until the mission was complete. In the days that followed Alana's death, the air around Maplewood Lane hung heavy with silence. The police department called it a tragic misunderstanding. The news channels repeated the same line: officers mistook the victim for an armed suspect. But Marcus Hale had spent years in war zones. He knew what a cover story looked like, and this smelled like one. When he asked for the body camera footage, the department delayed. When he requested the incident report, it came back half-redacted, whole lines blacked out like secrets. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, staring at the papers, his mind racing. "Why redact anything," he muttered, "if you've got nothing to hide?" Neighbors began to tell him things, details that didn't match the official narrative. One said the officers shouted before turning their lights on. Another swore Alana never stepped outside, that she was shot through the window. The timeline made no sense. The dispatch log showed the officers arrived at 1:50 a.m., but the first shot was recorded at 1:52, just 2 minutes. 2 minutes, that's all it took to end his wife's life. Marcus's SEAL instincts kicked in. He started collecting his own evidence: the 911 call record, street cam footage, even the pattern of bullet trajectories in the porch wall. The more he uncovered, the more one truth became clear: this wasn't an accident. It was negligence, maybe worse. But when he confronted the police chief, the tone shifted. "Commander Hale, I understand your pain," the chief said, avoiding his eyes. "But let's not make this into something it's not." Marcus leaned forward, his voice low, calm, but dangerous. "Then you tell me what it is, Chief, because your officers shot my wife in her own home, and now every piece of evidence has a hole in it, just like she did." That's when the threats began, subtle, hidden behind polite warnings, anonymous emails, unmarked cars parked outside his house. Someone even left a note on his door: "Let it go, Commander." But Marcus Hale was not a man who let go. He was a man who finished what others were afraid to start. He reached out to an independent journalist, Tara Lynn, who had made a name exposing corruption within law enforcement. Together, they began piecing together a story that the department desperately wanted buried. Every file they uncovered led to another lie. Every lie pointed higher up the chain. The body cam footage, when finally leaked to the press, showed something chilling. Alana had clearly shouted, "It's just my phone," before the shots were fired. The truth was undeniable. The department scrambled to control the narrative. Spokespersons appeared on TV promising a full review. But Marcus knew reviews didn't bring justice. Facts did, and he was just getting started. By the third week after Alana's death, Commander Marcus Hale had uncovered enough inconsistencies to make any prosecutor nervous. But the deeper he dug, the clearer it became: this wasn't just a case of police error. It was a system protecting itself. Marcus had always believed in order, discipline, and truth, the values that shaped him in the Navy. But now, every door he knocked on closed in his face. The district attorney's office delayed his requests for evidence. The Internal Affairs Unit claimed their hands were tied. Even the media outlets that first covered the shooting suddenly went quiet, stories pulled down, headlines replaced. Someone, somewhere, was pulling strings. At night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He replayed the scene in his mind: her voice, her phone, the flash of light, and each time his grief turned sharper, more focused. He wasn't just fighting for Alana anymore. He was fighting for every family who'd been told to move on. Then one afternoon, journalist Tara Lynn called him with something big. "You're not gonna believe this," she said. She uncovered an internal memo dated 2 days after the shooting, instructing officers to align their statements before giving individual interviews. In other words, a coordinated cover-up. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. They're rewriting the truth. But exposing it wouldn't be easy. When Tara tried to publish her findings, her editor received a call from the police union's legal team threatening lawsuits, questioning her credibility, even digging into her past. It was intimidation 101. Still, Marcus refused to back down. He started posting fragments of the evidence online, short clips, photographs, timestamps. The videos went viral overnight. The public began demanding answers. Justice for Alana trended for days, and for the first time, the department felt pressure it couldn't ignore. But the backlash came fast. Anonymous accounts flooded Marcus's inbox with hate. A city official warned him that his military record might be re-evaluated if he kept pushing. It was clear they were trying to break him. But Marcus Hale wasn't built to break. He'd survived gunfire, desert warfare, and loss. Now his mission was justice, and he wasn't alone anymore. People across the nation began to rally behind him, recognizing the truth that could no longer be buried. The system didn't just fail Alana, it tried to erase her. Late one night, Tara turned to Marcus, her voice low. "They'll come for us next." Marcus looked up from the evidence board, covered in photos, documents, and red strings connecting names. His expression was calm, resolute. "Then let them," he said, "because this time they're not the only ones with training." By the fourth week after Alana's death, Commander Marcus Hale had transformed grief into focus. What the department didn't understand was that Marcus wasn't just a husband, he was a tactician. In the Navy SEALs, he'd been trained to dismantle enemy networks, patiently, piece by piece. Now he was doing the same thing here, only this time the battlefield was corruption. He began by mapping every name tied to the shooting, the responding officers, their commanding sergeant, the district attorney who'd approved the investigation delay, and even the city council members who quietly voted to restrict access to police body cam footage. His living room became a war room, maps, documents, and red string connecting every decision that led to that night. Marcus started leaking verified evidence to trusted reporters. First came the memo proving officers were told to coordinate their statements. Then came the dispatch log, showing a crucial timeline error. The biggest revelation, though, came from a body cam clip someone inside the department secretly sent to Tara, showing an officer muttering right after the shots, "We might have hit the wrong house." That one sentence changed everything. The footage spread like wildfire across the internet. Within hours, news anchors were asking the same question: did police raid the wrong home? Protesters filled the streets, holding signs that read "Justice for Alana Hale" and "Accountability Now." For the first time, the police department was on the defensive. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with outrage, he wanted results. He met with civil rights lawyers, federal investigators, and former military contacts. "I don't want revenge," he told them. "I want truth and change." His strategy was surgical. He filed a federal lawsuit not just against the officers, but against the city itself, citing gross negligence and suppression of evidence. Behind the scenes, though, the threats intensified. His home was vandalized, his car tires slashed. Someone even tried to hack his email, but Marcus knew fear and he knew how to use it. Every attempt to silence him only made his story louder. Tara's documentary team began filming his journey, capturing every meeting, every discovery. "The truth," she said in one interview, "isn't just what happened that night, it's what they tried to hide after." Then, in a televised press conference, Marcus made his first public statement. Standing tall behind a podium, wearing his Navy dress uniform, he looked straight into the cameras and said, "My wife was killed in her own home because someone made an assumption, and that assumption was fueled by fear. But what's worse than pulling the trigger is pretending it was an accident. I served this country for 20 years. I believed in its system of justice. Now I'm fighting to make it worthy of that belief." The crowd erupted. Reporters shouted questions. The city trembled under the weight of the truth finally breaking through. The man they thought would stay silent had just declared war, not with weapons, but with evidence, integrity, and a promise to his wife's memory. After months of relentless investigation, sleepless nights, and nationwide protests, Commander Marcus Hale's case finally reached the courtroom. The city buzzed with tension. News crews lined the courthouse steps, Activists held candles outside, and a single phrase echoed across the crowd: "Justice for Alana." Inside the courtroom, every seat was filled. On one side sat Marcus, calm but unreadable, his uniform immaculate, his presence commanding. On the other side, the two officers, Ryan Carter and Elena Brooks, avoided his gaze, flanked by attorneys and department officials. Between them lay the gulf of truth and the weight of a life lost. The prosecution began with the evidence Marcus had unearthed: the body cam footage, the redacted reports, the dispatch call with conflicting times. Each piece painted the same chilling picture: a rush to judgment, a failure to identify, and a desperate attempt to rewrite what happened after the fact. When the footage played in the courtroom, the silence was suffocating. The jury watched as Alana's faint voice echoed, "It's just my phone." Then came the shots. Gasps filled the room. Even the defense attorneys looked shaken. The defense argued fear, that the officers acted on training, that the object in her hand looked like a weapon. But Marcus's attorney countered with precision. "Training doesn't mean shooting first," she said. "It means assessing before you pull the trigger." When Marcus took the stand, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. His voice was steady, his words sharp. "In the SEALs, we're trained to act under pressure, but never to shoot without sight, never to assume the enemy is a threat without confirmation. My wife wasn't a threat. She was a doctor. She was my world." A tear slipped down his cheek, the first visible crack in his composure. The courtroom felt his pain like a pulse. Then came the turning point. Tara Lynn, the journalist, testified about the leaked memo and the pressure she faced. Her testimony confirmed what everyone suspected: there had been an effort to control the narrative. The chief's emails were revealed next, showing internal communication that labeled Alana's death as containable before the investigation even began. The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed her gavel, demanding order, but the damage was done, the truth was out. By the final day, the weight of the evidence was undeniable. The officers' faces told a story no lawyer could hide: guilt, fear, and realization. When the verdict was finally read, the air froze. "We, the jury, find the defendants guilty of involuntary manslaughter." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Marcus closed his eyes, exhaling a breath he'd been holding for months. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was something, a beginning. As the officers were led away, Marcus looked toward the ceiling, as if speaking silently to Alana. "We did it," he whispered. Outside, the crowd erupted in applause and tears. Reporters surrounded him, microphones flashing. But Marcus didn't speak to the cameras. He simply held up a photo of his wife, smiling, radiant, and said, "This is who they took from me, but her story will change this system." Courthouse steps were emptying, but the world outside was far from silent. The story of Alana Hale's death and Marcus Hale's relentless fight for justice had spread across national headlines, social media, and cable news networks. Hashtags like "Justice for Alana" and "Accountability Now" trended worldwide. People from every corner of the country reached out, offering support, sharing stories of similar tragedies, and demanding systemic reform. Marcus returned to the quiet of his home, but it was never the same. Every corner, every photograph, every sound reminded him of Alana, yet he knew that mourning alone would not honor her memory. Drawing on his SEAL training and discipline, he began to organize initiatives aimed at police reform, bias training, and community awareness. His focus shifted outward, toward change that could prevent another family from experiencing the same horror. He met with lawmakers, military contacts, and civic leaders, advocating for stricter accountability measures and independent review boards. The media followed him closely, portraying him as both a grieving husband and a hero fighting an entrenched system. Marcus accepted the attention with restraint. Every word he spoke was measured, deliberate, and aimed at creating real impact. In the neighborhood, healing began in small ways. Maya Hale, now older, placed her mother's favorite books on the porch where she used to sit. Neighbors offered quiet support, planting flowers in Alana's memory. The community slowly started to process the shock, using Marcus's strength as a beacon of resilience. Yet even amid the progress, Marcus carried a quiet burden. Every night he trained as if he were back on a mission, his body alert, his mind sharp, but his purpose was now different. He trained not for war, but to safeguard truth, justice, and accountability. The nation began to take notice. Several cities implemented policy changes inspired by Marcus's advocacy. News outlets highlighted the story as an example of courage, discipline, and the power of a single person to fight systemic injustice. Marcus's approach, strategic, patient, unrelenting, showed the world that even in the face of unimaginable loss, action could replace despair. Through it all, Marcus remained steadfast in one principle, that Alana's legacy would not be defined by the tragedy of her death, but by the change her loss could inspire. He knew her life, her dedication, her compassion, her love would continue to impact countless others through his mission. The story of Alana Hale and Commander Marcus Hale is one that lingers long after the headlines fade. It is a story of tragedy, but also of resilience, courage, and the relentless pursuit of truth. What began as a catastrophic misunderstanding became a symbol of what happens when systems fail, and when individuals refuse to accept injustice quietly. Marcus's journey reminds us that even in the darkest moments, action and integrity can shine through. A single life lost should never be in vain. A single voice can ripple into a movement. Through his advocacy, public testimony, and unwavering commitment to justice, Marcus transformed personal grief into national awareness. This story matters because it forces us to reflect on our own society. How many times do fear, assumption, and bias dictate actions with irreversible consequences? How often does the truth remain hidden until someone refuses to be silenced? And most importantly, what role can each of us play in demanding accountability, fairness, and compassion in our communities? At Swift Tale, we believe that real-life stories like Marcus and Alana's remind us to pay attention, not just to headlines, but to the human lives behind them. So, I want to ask you, what would you do if faced with the same injustice? How far would you go to uncover the truth and protect those you love? If this story moved you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Swift Tale. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your voice matters, and your perspective can inspire others. Share this story with friends and family because the lessons within it extend far beyond one neighborhood, one family, or one headline. As we close this chapter, remember this: Alana Hale's life was taken too soon, but her legacy lives on through Marcus's courage, through reform, and through the awareness sparked in every person who hears their story. Justice is not just a verdict, it is a responsibility we carry together.